Hello, everybody. This is Monica from #GoalsEnglish. I'm going to give it a few moments and see if anyone joins. So my goal for these live lessons is to read through books and talk about vocabulary as I read and some pronunciation as well. So let's get started. So this is The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, and this is Chapter 1, The Cyclone. Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em, who was the farmer's wife. Their house was small, for the lumber to build it had to be carried by wagon many miles. There were 4 walls, a floor, and a roof, which made one room. And this room contained a rusty-looking cook stove, a cupboard for the dishes, a table, 3 or 4 chairs, and the beds. Uncle Henry and Aunt Em had a big bed in one corner, and Dorothy a little bed in another corner. So I'm going to go back here. So Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies. Kansas is a state here in the United States, and the prairies are flat land where you would have farming, maybe fields. Okay. With Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em. So we can say aunt or aunt. I think I might have used both. Aunt Em, Aunt Em. Both are okay. Their house was small for the lumber to build it. Lumber here means wood, the pieces of wood to build the house. Had to be carried by wagon many miles. So another word for wagon might be cart, something with 4 wheels that you pull with things on it. There were 4 walls, a floor, so floor, and a roof, which made one room. So look at these double O's. I have a great lesson on all the different double O sounds, but this one is more of an or sound. Floor, or. A floor, and then this one is oo like moon, roof, which made one room. So room and roof, same sound. And this room contained a rusty-looking cook stove. Rusty. A cupboard for the dishes. Cupboard, like a cabinet where you put dishes inside. A table, 3 or 4 chairs, and the beds. Okay. So it's saying there's just one room for 3 people. Uncle, Aunt, and Dorothy. Their beds are in the corner. So let's start here. Uncle Henry and Aunt Em had a big bed in one corner, and Dorothy a little bed in another corner. Notice the word little. I said little because I'm reading, but talking normally I would say little with a flap T, the little. I see someone in the comments. Hi! Why have you stopped uploading videos on YouTube? I might post a video about that soon. But I'm back now. So thank you for watching. And let me know if you have any questions about the story. There was no garret at all and no cellar, except a small hole dug in the ground called a cyclone cellar, where the family could go in case of one of those great whirlwinds arose. Oh, in case one of those great whirlwinds arose, mighty, mighty strong enough to crush any building in its path. So let's pause there. He uses the word cyclone in this story, but what he means is tornado. Tornado is when the wind is going really fast. If you've seen the movie, you've seen the tornado. He calls it cyclone. So garret, I'm not even sure. I don't really use this word. But cellar, another word we have for this is basement. So the room that's under the first floor of your house. So they're saying they didn't have a cellar. They just had a small hole in the ground that they called a cyclone cellar, where the family could go in case of one of those great whirlwinds. This is talking about the twister or tornado again. Cyclone, twister, tornado. I think they say twister in the movie. They say, it's a twister. In case one of those great whirlwinds happened, mighty enough to crush any building in its path. It was reached by a trap door in the middle of the floor, from which a ladder led down into the small, dark hole. So we have this verb, crush, right? Any building in its path. So a tornado comes and it can crush or destroy any building in its path. Trap door, just a door that maybe you pull up that's on the ground, and which had a ladder. So you go down the ladder into a small dark hole in the ground. So let's continue. When Dorothy stood in the doorway and looked around, she could see nothing but the great gray prairie on every side. Not a tree nor a house broke the broad sweep of flat country that reached to the edge of the sky in all directions. So she stood in her doorway, where the door is, and looked around, and she just saw flat everywhere. Flat earth and sky. So it's painting a picture that there's nothing around. The sun had baked the plowed land into a gray mass, with little cracks running through it. Even the grass was not green, for the sun had burned the tops of the long blades until they were the same gray color to be seen everywhere. So we're seeing it's very gray, dry, no colors, no water. Once the house had been painted, but the sun blistered the paint and the rains washed it away. And now the house was dull and gray, was as dull and gray as everything else. So they tried to paint the house, but it got so dry it blistered, so it cracked and peeled. And the rains washed it away. When Aunt Em came there to live, she was a young, pretty wife. The sun and wind had changed her too. They had taken the sparkle from her eyes and left them sober and gray. Interesting. They had taken the red from her cheeks and lips, and they were gray also. So again, he's just telling us it's kind of a hard life. There's not much color. The sun is hard and difficult. And it's affecting how everything looks. Everything is gray. She was thin and gaunt and never smiled now. She never smiled. When Dorothy, who was an orphan, orphan means her mother and father died. She does not have a mother and father anymore. When Dorothy was an orphan, when Dorothy, who was an orphan, first came to her, Aunt Em had been so startled by the child's laughter that she would scream and press her hands upon her heart whenever Dorothy's merry, happy voice reached her ears. And she still looked at the little girl with wonder that she could find anything to laugh at. Ooh. So Aunt Em's life was so sad that when Dorothy laughed, it startled her, scared her, and she'd go, "Huh!" She wasn't used to happiness and didn't understand, right? She wondered how Dorothy could laugh. Uncle Henry never laughed. He worked hard from morning till night and did not know what joy was. Joy, happiness. He was gray also, from his long beard to his rough boots, and he looked stern and solemn and rarely spoke. Stern and solemn. So he's very serious, didn't laugh, very hard person, and rarely spoke. He didn't talk much. It was Toto that made Dorothy laugh and saved her from growing as gray as her other surroundings, the things around her. Toto was not gray. He was a little black dog with long, silky hair, like smooth, silky hair, and small black eyes that twinkled merrily, happily, on either side of his funny, wee nose. Wee means small. Toto played all day long, and Dorothy played with him and loved him dearly. Today, however, they were not playing. Uncle Henry sat upon the doorstep and looked anxiously at the sky. Anxiously at the sky, which was even grayer than usual. Dorothy stood in the door with Toto in her arms and looked at the sky too. Aunt Em was washing the dishes. Cool. Any questions so far? So far, we just know that Dorothy is in a sad place that's gray and not very fun. So let's see what happens to Dorothy. From the far north, they heard a low wail of wind, and Uncle Henry and Dorothy could see where the long grass bowed in waves before the coming storm. So a low wail, like the sound of the wind coming in. There now came a sharp whistling in the air from the south. Whistling. I can't whistle. And as they turned their eyes that way, they saw ripples in the grass coming from that direction also. Suddenly, Uncle Henry stood up. This double O, stood, like wood and good. Suddenly, Uncle Henry stood up. "There's a cyclone coming, Em," he called to his wife. So remember, cyclone is a tornado or twister. "I'll go look after the stock. I'll go look after the stock." That means he's going to go check to see if the animals are okay and help them. He ran towards the sheds where the cows and horses were kept. So the stock is the cows and horses, right? The stock animals. And he ran towards the sheds. Sheds are like little houses where you keep tools or animals, like a barn. Aunt Em dropped her work and came to the door. One glance told her the danger was close at hand. One glance is a fast look, glance, told her the danger was close at hand, very close. "Quick, Dorothy!" she screamed. "Run for the cellar." Remember, the cellar is the underground hole. "Run for the cellar." Toto jumped out of Dorothy's arms and hid under the bed, and the girl started to get him. Aunt Em, badly frightened, very scared, threw open the trap door in the floor and climbed down the ladder into the small, dark hole. Dorothy caught Toto at last and started to follow her aunt. So follow, go after her aunt. When she was halfway across the room, there came a great shriek from the wind. Shriek is like a loud, high scream. Eee! And the house shook so hard that she lost her footing and sat down suddenly upon the floor. She lost her footing, like your foot, she fell down, lost her footing. Then a strange thing happened. The house whirled, so twisted or turned. The house whirled around 2 or 3 times and rose slowly through the air. Dorothy felt as if she were going up in a balloon. The north and south winds met where the house stood and made the exact center of the cyclone. In the middle of a cyclone, the air is generally still, but the great pressure of the wind on every side of the house raised it up higher and higher until it was at the very top of the cyclone. And there it remained and was carried miles and miles away, as easily as you could carry a feather. So a feather is what birds have. So it was carried miles away as easily as you could carry a feather. It was very dark, and the wind howled horribly around her. It's another word for a kind of yell. This one is more like a dog would do. We say howl like, ow! We have all these words shrieked and howled and all of these wind sounds. It was very dark, and the wind howled horribly around her. But Dorothy found she was riding quite easily. After the first few whirls around, and one other time when the house tipped badly, she felt as if she were being rocked gently, like a baby in a cradle. Like a baby in a cradle. Cradle is a baby bed. Toto did not like it. He ran about the room, now here, now there, barking loudly. Barking is the sound dogs make. But Dorothy sat quietly still on the floor and waited to see what would happen. Sat quite still, so very still, not quietly. I made a mistake. Quite still, very still. Once Toto got too near the open trap door and fell in, and at first the little girl thought she had lost him. Oh, so remember the trap door is in the floor, in the ground, and he fell through. But soon she saw one of his ears sticking up through the hole, for the strong pressure of the air was keeping him up so that he could not fall. She crept to the hole and caught Toto by the ear and dragged him into the room again, afterward closing the trap door so that no more accidents could happen. Hour after hour passed away, and slowly Dorothy got over her fright, her fear. But she felt quite lonely, and the wind shrieked. Remember that loud, high yell? Eee! Shrieked. So loudly all about her that she nearly became deaf. Deaf is when someone can't hear. At first, she had wondered if she would be dashed to pieces when the house fell again. Dashed to pieces, like broken apart. At first, she had wondered if she would be dashed to pieces when the house fell again. But as the hours passed and nothing terrible happened, she stopped worrying and resolved to wait calmly and see what the future would bring. At last, she crawled over the swaying floor to her bed and lay down upon it. And Toto followed and laid down beside her. In spite of the swaying of the house and the wailing of the wind, Dorothy soon closed her eyes and fell fast asleep. So even though the house was moving, she's still in the tornado. She went to her bed and went to sleep. All right, well, that's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comments if you want more help with the vocabulary or pronunciation if you need me to go faster or slower, so I can better help you practice your English. All right, see you next time.